right, we're back here on Mile High Sports Radio. Ultimate Politics, your place for finding out the news about our elected officials and people running for office and the issues that concern you. You know, we've been on the air now for about a year here on Mile High Sports Radio, and by no means do I take myself very seriously, although I take what I do very seriously, and that's a shout out to Gil Whiteley, who's our nooner sports guy. But, you know, I do this because I love it, not for any other reason. I want to get these issues out because I believe in things like changing the economy of Colorado and the country, giving workers and farmers a better chance at making a good living, and I want to get these opinions of these candidates out there so people will know their options and have a choice. And when some guy, was it John Clark up at KCOL, calls the studio ranting and raving saying that, you know, Betsy Markey's afraid to debate or is ducking a debate. We've had this scheduled for over a month, and then they call this station, which is a sports station, some liberal station. You know, you know what it tells me? They have nothing. They have nothing to run on except what they failed to do with the power they had for 6-8 years in office, and now they're just resorting to mudslinging. And you know what? That's fine, because I think the American people and the citizens of Colorado, especially up there in CD4, know what's at stake. We don't want to stay in an endless war in Iraq. We don't want $4 a gallon gas. We don't want our jobs being low paying and with no health care. And we certainly don't want to go down the same path that we've been doing for so long and getting bad returns on our investment. It's time for a change, and that's what this country wants, and that's what they're going to get with Betsy Markey up in CD4. Betsy, you know, we were just talking about some of the people you've met out there. Do you sense a hunger for change? I mean, you've been a small business owner. You've worked in the State Department. You've traveled around the world working in the State Department. What kind of things do you reflect on from your days working at the State Department and then talking to people around Colorado about what they want to see, where they want to see the country go?
Yes, and you mentioned, Wade, I've been in the race for about a year now because, you know, like everyone else in this country, I'm frustrated with what's gone on in Washington, D.C., bickering on both sides, a lot of pointing the finger of blame, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it like anyone else. I'm also tired of the reckless fiscal irresponsibility of this administration. We have gone from a record surplus in the 1990s to record deficits. We just had to raise the
record
debt
amount of
ceiling
time.
in a record amount of time. We got a lot of work to do to change that around. You know, you mentioned I have had 2 successful businesses. I've been able to live within my means, manage budgets and payroll, and still make a profit. I haven't had the luxury of doing deficit spending as what's going on in Washington, D.C. So we have got to get back to living within our means, and I support pay-as-you-go budgeting principles, and that is if you're going to increase spending in one place, you've got to find an offset somewhere else in the budget. We've got to turn this around. We cannot leave this legacy to our children. You know, and the Republican playbook is, you know, been pretty much the same. Oh, you know, it's just going to be another tax and spend Democrat, and you know, I think that sounds like a broken record because I'm tired of the borrow and spend administration that has put us in debt, you know, that it's bankrupt our children's future. And we've got to be very serious about turning this around, Republicans and Democrats working together to bring some fiscal sense to the budget process in Washington. Part of your job as a candidate, and certainly as an elected official as well, is to be able to, you know, look the voters in the eyes and tell them, you know, exactly how you feel on an issue. You may have to agree to disagree, but that's your job, is to listen to people, and that's what I've been doing. And as I said, I've been learning a lot, and people are open to someone. You know, what I hear from Republicans and independents more than anything else is they say, if you go to Washington, will you please just not vote the party line, but vote your conscience, keep us in mind, and try to get something done in Washington, D.C., because the partisan bitterness just has to stop. And that's what we've seen going on in Washington in the last 8 years, is that, you know, the Republicans and Democrats are pitted against one another. And, you know, we're Americans, as you mentioned, Wade. We're Americans before we're Democrats or Republicans, and we should start acting like that. You know, the taxpayer puts elected officials into office not to blame the other person for what they can't get accomplished, but to get back in there, roll up their sleeves, and try again. To do something to move our country forward in a positive manner that actually solves some of the issues that we all care about.
When I had some people on to saying that Colorado, with the Energy Institute, saying Colorado had 20 to 40 times the amount of wind and solar energy needed to power this state. In fact, enough to power the entire Midwest is just sitting in Colorado, just waiting for leadership in the Congress to come in and say, let's take advantage of this resource.
Exactly. And when we have faced other huge problems, which I think that it is an energy crisis. But if you look at this country during after the Great Depression or World War II, it seemed like we faced insurmountable problems. But we are a nation of optimists, and we will use technology, and we will use innovation, and we will not only solve this problem, but we will become a stronger nation because of it. And we can be a leader in changing the way we power this country, and putting forth renewables as that way: electric, solar, wind, geothermal, and it's there. The technology is there. It's just if we can harness it, and it's going to be government and private investment to get us there.
And we know that your opponent, and I know that you want to stay above the fray, but I've got to say this: your opponent, Marilyn Musgrave, has received tons of money from the oil and gas industry, or just the oil industry, forget the gas industry, and has basically done whatever that they wanted her to do. And now that she's facing a challenge, now she's talking about, well, we need to do something about oil prices. Well, you're the one that didn't do anything for all those years that you were in Congress. So, we're going to take a break. But I just want to say to those guys over at KCOL, because I'm getting too hot over this, John Clark, if you ever want to have Marilyn Musgrave come on this show and debate Betsy Markey, I'm throwing down the gauntlet right now. Just come on the show, man. I'll be fair, and we'll get those issues out. And we're not afraid to debate. We've had an interesting 8 years under the Bush administration, and people have realized around the country that we need to go in a totally different direction with our foreign policy. There are crises with Russia. There are things going on in the Middle East. There are our blunders in Iraq, and the things we haven't done effectively in Afghanistan. And the volatility of the world has really got to be addressed by the next administration. And one person's voice I'm looking forward to hearing from is candidate Betsy Markey when she gets into Congress, because you actually do have a lot of foreign experience with the State Department. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I worked for the State Department for a number of years. I was the first director of computer security policy and training, and this was back in the 1980s when all of our embassies and consulates overseas were beginning to put their information on computers, and it was our job to go to these different places around the world, the embassies and our consulates, and look at the computer systems, how the information was being protected, both classified and unclassified information, and develop computer security protocols. So it was a really interesting job. Got to visit quite a number of embassies around the world. Got to see the great work that has been being done by our Foreign Service officers overseas. And it was a time in the 1980s where you would go out to after work, you would go out to dinner, and you would talk to locals, and who were always very interested to talk about American politics and about culture. And all of that has changed. I think in the few short years since 9/11, this administration has managed to squander every last bit of goodwill that other countries around the world had showed this country after that awful tragedy. And we really have pushed aside the State Department and diplomacy in favor of a military presence. And I know the rest of the world is anxious for the elections this November, because we have got to turn this country around. The policies of this Congress and the Bush administration has been, it's my way or the highway, and if you don't like it, tough luck. And we've got a lot of work to do to go from being, a global bully to once again a global partner. And we've got a lot of problems that we need to solve together. We've got terrorism, global warming, AIDS, and these are all problems that we're going to have to solve multilaterally, not just with the United States. So we're going to have to enlist the support once again of the world community to solve some of these pressing problems.